Hola, hoy vamos a hablar del verbo gustar y otros verbos como gustar. Hello, today we are going to talk about the verb gustar and other verbs like gustar. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify what ending of gustar and other verbs like gustar is needed to complete a sentence. First, let's look at some of the vocabulary that we will use in our examples and in our practice activities. The first verb is gustar, which means to like, or another way to think of it is to make happy, when something makes us happy. The next verb, encantar, is to love something, or when something makes us really, really happy. The next verb, fascinar, is a cognate. It means to fascinate. The next verb is also a cognate, interesar, which means to interest. And the final verb, aburrir, means to bore. So let's look at some examples to kind of begin to wrap our heads around how these verbs. So let's look at some examples of how these verbs are used. Please write down the Spanish sentence that you see and the English translation that I dictate. The first sentence we'll look at uses the verb gustar. Me gusta la comida italiana. I like Italian food, or Italian food makes me happy. The next sentence we'll look at uses the verb encantar. Me encanta tocar la guitarra. I love to play the guitar, or playing the guitar makes me really, really happy. The next two verbs that we'll look at, as I erase this board here, are also used to express things that we prefer, things that we like. So these first four verbs that we have are all different ways of talking about things we like, things that make us happy, but just in slightly different ways. So the next verb we'll look at is fascinar, to fascinate. Me fascinan otras culturas. Other cultures fascinate me, or I'm fascinated by other cultures. This is something that I like. Along those same lines is the verb interesar. Me interesan los idiomas. Languages interest me, or I am interested in languages. So these first four verbs, interesar, fascinar, gustar, and encantar, are four ways of talking about things that we like or that make us happy. The last verb that we'll look at is aburrir, which means to bore. Me aburren las películas de Disney. Disney movies bore me, or I am bored by Disney movies, unfortunately. Okay, so the next part of our lesson is we're going to look at how to actually use these verbs in a sentence. And what you're looking at right now is kind of a sentence diagram. And we're going to go through what each of these phrases and little words and endings and what all of this means. But before we do that, I want to just draw your attention to the example sentence that we started with at the beginning of our lesson. Me gusta la comida italiana. Now, this sentence has three major parts to it. We're going to talk about on this slide 4 key parts to a sentence, and I'll explain why this sentence, our example one, has only 3 parts to it. So, to start with, the 4 parts of any sentence that uses gustar or verbs like gustar, I will be labeling as part A, part B, part C, and part D. Part A, an easy way to remember how to start a sentence. Part A always starts with the letter A or A. Okay? In part A, we are distinguishing or identifying who likes something or who loves something or who's interested or fascinated or bored by something. So part A is an important part of a sentence because it helps us identify who we are talking about. Part B, and these little words that you see in its column, kind of do the same thing. And we'll get into later on in the school year what these little words do and how they're used. For now, I would say the best thing for you to understand is that anytime you say a mí, you need to have me right next to it. And anytime you say a ti, you need to have te next to it. A él or ella, le. A usted, le. A nosotros, nos. A vosotros, os. A ellos, a ellas, les. And a ustedes, les. So parts A and B work in unison. So if you have part A, you need to have part B, okay? And both these parts help us figure out who likes, loves, is fascinated, interested, or bored by something. The next 2 parts also work together. Part C and D work together. Part C is where you're going to find your verb. So one of those 5 vocabulary words that we talked about. It's also where you're going to conjugate your verb. And you'll notice that these verbs, gustar and the 4 others, only have 2 conjugations. So an AR verb like gustar or encantar, fascinar, or interesar will only ever use a or an for its conjugations. The verb aburrir, because it's an IR verb, will use a or n. So these verbs that we're studying right now will 99% of the time only take 2 conjugations. The way you discover or figure out which ending to use depends on what you find in part D. So, in part D is where you'll find the thing that makes you happy, or the thing that you love, or the thing that you're interested in, or the thing you're fascinated or bored by. And so, there's only 3 options. In part D, you can only ever have a singular noun, an infinitive, or a plural noun. And if you have a singular noun or an infinitive, you have to use the él, ella, usted conjugation, the 3rd person singular conjugation. Even if the person who loves it is me, or you, or us, or you all, or them. If you have a singular noun or an infinitive at the end of your sentence, you will use the singular conjugation. If you have a plural noun at the end of your sentence, then you will have a plural conjugation. Even if your object is singular, like a mí, or a ti, or a él, or ella. Okay? So the end of our sentence is what dictates what conjugation to use. So if we look back at our original example sentence up here, we see that La comida italiana is a singular noun. We can tell that because the article is singular and our noun and adjective both end in a singular way. Because this is a singular noun, we use a singular conjugation. So, the four parts of the sentence, parts A, B, C, and D, always go in this order, A, B, C, and D. To review, parts A and B will always work in unison, meaning whichever part you have in A, you have to use its counterpart in B. Likewise, parts C and D work together as well. If you have a singular noun or an infinitive, you need a singular conjugation. And if you have a plural noun, you need a plural conjugation. So, the last thing I'd like to talk about on this slide is why I don't have a part A in my sentence. So, part A is not necessary. It's helpful, but it's not necessary. Part A helps to clarify to any person that we're speaking to or writing to about who likes something or who loves something or is interested, etc., in something. If we just had part B, we would have complete sentences. And we can write sentences starting with just part B. We can leave off part A if we want to. However, do you notice anything that can be maybe a bit confusing in part B? If you notice that le and les are used with a bunch of different people, then you picked up on the confusing part. So, especially for le and les, it's important to include a él or a ella or a usted, a ellos, a ellas, a ustedes at the beginning of your sentence. It helps for your listener and it helps for your reader to clarify who likes or loves or is interested in something, etc. So I didn't include a mí because me is the only one that uses a mí. I don't need this here to make it clear that I like Italian food. Okay? So, the four parts of a sentence help us keep these verbs in the correct order. Now, to finish off this lesson, on this slide, there are 5 practice problems. Use your notes and complete each sentence with the missing part. Every sentence starts with part A. You need to fill in part B and part C, which is the conjugation of the verb. At this point, you should pause this video and complete these practice exercises. We are about to move on to the next slide, in which we will go through the answers. Okay, let's take a look at the answers to these. So, here are the same sentences you just had on the last slide. Let's go through the answers together, explaining why each sentence had this particular part B and C. In the first sentence, a mi amigo, we will use le. A mi amigo is the same as a él. La comida italiana is a singular noun, so we will have the conjugation a at the end of our verb. The next one, a nosotros, uses the indirect object pronoun nos. And la música puertorriqueña is singular, so we will also have the conjugation a. And the next one, a mis amigos, or a ellos, we will have the indirect object pronoun les. But in this one, las clases is a plural noun. So we will have the plural conjugation an. In number 4, a ti goes with te, and we have an infinitive verb. So we have a singular conjugation. And lastly, a mi mamá or a ella, we use le, and el béisbol is a singular noun, so we have a singular conjugation. I hope you all did well, and if you have any questions, please have them ready at the beginning of class. See you all soon.